name is Bartlomiej Postek. For the last 11 years, I founded and developed a couple educational technology companies like Fun Media, Learny, and a couple others. We are maybe not the biggest success in the sector, but we've survived. We have over 1 million registered users. We are selling around 20,000 individual accesses to our courses a year in 50 different countries. We also cooperate with Polish Ministry of Education. We co-create multimedia online course books that are being used in schools, and we've been doing this for the last 8 years. From the beginning, we had this ambition to start with the methodology of learning, and on top of that, use technology and multimedia as an accelerator of potential, of creating new kind of course books using internet online courses. We've been doing MOOCs before we knew the name. I was able to gather a lot of experience, and because I'm in this no man's zone between a failure and a big success, I have this feeling that the biggest value I have now is to give other people my experience so that they can overcome the stuff that hold me back. I know myself how many mistakes I could have avoided if someone just asked me a specific question. Of course, in the end, the founder has to know what to do. But the best thing with getting a good mentor, from my perspective, is hearing good questions. If you get a good question, it makes you stop and think. And many times you have this conclusion, okay, the mentor doesn't have the answer. Usually we don't. But the question is so important that I know for certain that before I have at least an idea for an answer, I should stop and think about it. And in many times in those 11 years that I was developing my companies, I didn't have this kind of questions that made me stop. So I know how much time and money I've wasted in pursuing stuff that someone a bit more experienced with other perspective could at least make me stop and think and improve on it. So this is why I do what I do. So anyone who knows what a startup is, it should be at least a fast-growing company with a product or service that can be scalable, and it's connected with technology. So first of all, picking a job concerning with new technologies is always a good idea for someone finishing their studies, because you're not competing with workers that have like 5 or 15 years more experience than you, because usually the technology is newer. So you have more even playing field for you to develop. Of course, you can make a mistake and choose a wrong technology, but still it's worth the chance. So technology is one thing. The other one is the fast growth and uncertainty, especially for people who are still thinking what's the job and career path they want to follow, and they have a lot of questions that they want to get a quick answers, what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. Startup is the best place for those kind of people. If you still have a lot of questions, startup is an accelerator for the answers of those questions. You can pivot and iterate quickly in the startup, because usually there's so many things happening all of a sudden that anyone with an engagement, a good reputation in a small team can be picked to take a new job that just emerged that needs to be done, and you don't have resources or time to get someone from the job market. So it's a good place to start, because you never know what kind of job opportunity is going to emerge inside of the team. Of course, you have a lot of risk that you have to think about it. You cannot count on stability and stable career path. Usually no one will tell you what can you do in 2 years from now. Many times they're not going to tell you what can you do 8 months from starting. Of course, it has a bad side. If you know what your career path should be, that is, you have this feeling, usually I would give a startup career a second thought. But for anyone with a lot of questions, looking for quick answers and a lot of possibilities to iterate and check couple career paths in as quickly as possible, startups is a very good way to do it. There's two situations that you have to think about while joining a startup. A startup can be can be a success or a failure. Of course, the best idea is to join a startup that has a high probability of being a success, right? But still, because of the way the startup ecosystem works, you can only decrease the possibility that the startup will fail without you having any effect on the situation. So what can you do? You have to look for a startup in which you can develop skills and that will be very, very profitable for you, even in the case of startups failure. So for example, you can join an AI startup or blockchain startups, stuff like that, because even in the end it's going to be a failure. The project that you join, probably the area will be very, very good to have professional experience in. So you have to think from this lens first of all, so because you have the control over it. Always in startups, you always have to think about what do you have personal control over. Usually the list is not too long. So from my perspective, starting a career in a startup is a great idea for anyone who has high work ethics, doesn't need to be micromanaged, and at least thinks of himself that he or she has a good culture of work. Because usually in startups you won't have enough time to develop those basic skills. I don't want, sometimes you will have it, but many times you won't. On the good side of it is that if you have those qualities, you can accelerate your career, and you can sidestep like at least half a year of career development that usually in companies, people are spending a couple of months looking at those basic competencies that you have in work, like basic competency in checking your schedule, doing your basic tasks. If you already know and trust yourself that you can do it, you can hop over those stages of development and already be in a more engaging and professional place in your career. So the best stuff is that you can, if the company is growing, usually the first thing that the company is doing is using the talent pool that they already have. So the quickest career you can do it only in startups, right? Because only in startups you can be like 20-something-year-old as a director of a big team, right? Concerning you will be good at that job and the startup will grow, which is, of course, is not that. Many times you won't have this kind of situation, but still the probability of this kind of situation is much higher than in established or big organization that have procedures and time-consuming procedures to enhance your career. You can check what does it mean a quick career from a junior grad to, for example, department director in a quickly developing startup versus established organization. And usually in a startup, it's going to be like 2 years, and the same career path will be a quick career path in an established organization will be more like 10 years, I think. In inspiring your team, especially while working in startup, is asking yourself what do you want, what change you want to see in the world, and your startup, your product or service should be a way of achieving a change in a specific market or bigger change. This way or the other, usually you have to clarify this goal, and the goal itself should be inspiring, right? So what kind of change do you want to enhance? By technology, by your service, product that you provide, by your work. And while people have this goal in mind and align themselves with it, have a high inspiration and motivation to achieve it. Because when you fail, even in this kind of effort, you always have this feeling that it was worth it, that you had some kind of adventure and experience that was worth the risk. Well, a career when you develop a startup or you work in startup, adaptation skills, I think should be your highest priority. When you have this Maslow pyramid, survival is the most important stuff you have to think of, and after that you can have higher ambitions. So adaptations yes, adaptation skills is very important. It goes along with your leadership skills. For example, in my career, my company at one point we had over 50 people on board. And now we have the same revenue with 9 people on board. So you can imagine that I had to use different kind of skills when I was growing the organization to the point of 50 plus people, and totally different kind of skills when I was decreasing the number of people. It was 2 different processes. One was like, giving the people vision and giving them inspiration to first join the team and then develop the products. And then when we have car crash with the market changes that we couldn't control, then we had this kind of the process of telling people what's the maybe not too optimistic future will be, and what we can do as a team to sustain our relationship as good terms as possible. Was hard, right? I think in the end, because what you can do, the relationship you form with your team is on the short list that I've mentioned you about. This is the relationship you have with your team, with your co-founders and workers and your most important partners. Those relationships are very important, and they are on the very short list of things that you can control while developing a startup. This is why it should be always a highest priority in this kind of crisis, when stuff don't go the way that you imagined and you made other people believe they're gonna do. You have to think about those relationships, how you can still be in contact with those people, and what's the future in this, what's the new kind of future of your relationship will be. In our mind was, we don't know when and how we can cooperate in the future, but we treat each other and the time we've spent together as very beneficial for us. And of course, we can say sorry that the start didn't turn out the way we've imagined. But what can we do together to make this process of stopping the cooperation in the model that we had as swiftly and painfully as possible. It wasn't easy, as you can imagine. It was 2 different skills. First of all, on the growth stage, you should be someone inspiring, a bit even boastful, aspiring to be the best. When you have this downward spiral, you have to give as much comfort as you can and be as truthful and to people as possible, but without giving them the bad probabilities and information that they cannot do anything about. So giving yours, this is a different kind of responsibility, and it wasn't easy. So first of all, I think with leadership, you have to respect the people that you work with and have in mind those different scenarios, and then you can go with them. And stuff that always go as well as you planned, but sometimes they don't go as bad as you thought they will. So, and different skills you have in your own, toolkits to use. So, well, because I think it's like 90% communication leadership. I think is like 90% of the job. In the end, you're supposed to make people do and feel stuff that you want them to do or feel, right? Either it's motivation, like those feeling side, or like plain work, like to-dos that they're supposed to do. And this is your job as a leader, to make other people do those stuff, feel those stuff, and feel good about it, right? Not feeling forced. So how can you do it other way than communication? Like, communication is the only powerful tool. Even in the end, if you have some incentives like money, shares, whatever, it's still like part of your communication more than the other way around, right? So you communicate that you want the best people do the project, develop the startup, and have shares in the spoils if they're gonna be there. So in the end, when those incentive systems appear, they're like only the conclusion of the communication that you've given in the beginning, not the other way around. So the leadership and communication, I think, is like almost the same for me. The job of co-founders is that as to The job of co-founders is to sustain the startup in this MVP version, right? So if you think about what job should we do as a co-founders and how many should there be of us, you should think about the worst case scenario, that everything goes through the window. And what's this like embryon-like kind of organization that we can create and sustain the life of the project? Of course, considering that we'll still believe in the future success of it. Sometimes it doesn't make sense still. So if everything goes not as planned, for example, some kind of virus enters the scene, co-founders team should have the toolkits of competencies that should allow the startup to survive. Right, like at least 80% of the product or service sustain survival and slow development should be able by the co-founders team. And sometimes it tells you that one person is okay. I shouldn't give you this kind of idea, because I can tell you we as a people have this kind of habit of getting sick or changing motivations. So from the perspective of our workers, even business partners, and especially investors, when they see one founder, usually they have this kind of short list of questions. Okay, what's going to happen when you're going to break your leg or something like that? What's going to happen with the project? So this is one perspective of the stuff you should think, and the other is the amount of competencies that you have to have in your co-founders team, as to in the worst scenario enable the project to slowly develop itself and survive. Usually you shouldn't have more people than 8, like this pizza theory, that communication goes off the cliff when you have more than 8 people in the team. So there's a lot of truth in that. You shouldn't be too focused on that, but there is something to think about it, because those 8 people team have been with us throughout the history. If you look through how the military was organized in different kinds of war, in different kinds of history. So it makes you think why those 8 to 10 teams seems to work the best. So I think it should be the same with co-founders. Usually what you see is the most teams of founders I've seen were somewhere between 2 and 4 people. And it's also okay with the amount of things and relations that can go wrong. The network effect quotation, probably, when you calculate how many relationships you have in your founders team, each more founder exponentially increase the number of relations that you have in the co-founders team, and relations can go off the cliff sometimes. So small teams of founders have a lot of strong points, but still having only one founder is always a bad idea. A lot of people that I work with have this question, how to find a co-founder, and I think this is like a holy grail in startups community. And usually when I see many groups on LinkedIn or Facebook of I'm looking for co-founders, I always think to myself, it's like the probability of getting 2 people that don't know each other to start the company is so small. I think it would make more logical sense to play lotto or some lottery, buy a ticket. I think the probability would be higher because when you start a company with someone, especially when it's a startup and there's a lot of things that you cannot plan in the beginning, it's always the question, how strong relationship and how quickly can you develop with this co-founder or co-founders. And what I usually like people to tell them, I have a lot of non-profit business and entrepreneurship kind of initiatives that I usually use and engage people in it. And many times they ask me why I do it and why they should do it. And usually I tell them this kind of anecdote that there will be a time when they will be at least thinking about starting a company, and they're gonna have this kind of paradox that most of us have. Many people think about starting a startup some way on the path of their careers. Not usually, most of the people don't do it just after studies as their first job, at least not as a co-founder. They do it after they acquire some skills and feel good as an expert in some area as a worker first, right? And then you have this phenomena: the best expert you want to be, and you have to focus yourself in this area of expertise that you want to develop yourself in. Either it's software development, business development skills, administration, analytics, whatever, right? The more you develop and the more successful you are in your career path, usually the smaller amount of relationships you have with people outside of your career path, right? And the best project that you can create as a founder usually needs teams of people, especially founders, who have different complementary skills. And then you have this question: okay, I'm a great programmer, right? I can develop great software, but I don't have too many, especially I don't have strong relationship with people with business skills. What can I do now? And the question is, from my perspective, getting involved anyway in this any kind of business initiative, like for example Supercharger Ventures Accelerator, or different kinds of associations, even forums, but like really get involved, go on a hackathon, put your knowledge to people who are looking for the answers as a founder from business perspective or marketing perspective, give them knowledge for free. Have this specific time frame to do it, especially not in some kind of enclosed groups that can give you this possibility that you can accumulate relationships value over time, even from small anecdotes and answers and advices that you give. And then you create this kind of perspective where you have an option and some kind of like this basic relationships, this micro projects that you've done with someone. And at least you have a starting point to start the discussion. Okay, remember this time last year when I helped you with this answer? Now I have a question for you. And when you give me the answer, you share your knowledge and experience. Usually this is a very good place to ask yourself the question: should I work more closely with this person, right? And the other stage that people usually like to skip, I think it's while looking for co-founders, it's okay to do together stuff before funding a startup that doesn't involve starting a startup. So do something together, like for free, like even if someone has a business value out of it. Do a small contract, paid one in the beginning. Get a feeling what's the communication is with a couple of people with those skills. Not start with what many people do, and it makes me angry many times. Like start with, hey, I have a great idea, I need a programmer. I put, and a post on the group that I'm looking for a developer who will work for free on my idea, and I will give him 20% of shares of startup that doesn't exist. You can do it if you have a strong relationship with this guy and you give some value and he trusts you and he or she will do it. Fine, okay, I have nothing to it. But doing the same thing with people you don't know, it cannot go good. It's always have to go wrong. So invest time in doing stuff that are not, based on money and shares in a startup in the beginning. I think there is a magic answer for how to choose a founder without looking only on those hard skills, right? Trust. Without trust, you can have everything in this relationship, right? The best set of network of people the best set of knowledge you both have, and experience and competencies, whatever. Without trust, it's gonna break very fast. And as always, how to create and sustain trust is not an easy answer. Usually, because people have the right to know how to do it. My answer is, especially in the beginning, but also after you enter this relationship, ask yourself the question: what kind of values do you give the other side? And especially the kind of values that you don't get an instant reward for it, because this kind of giving value without instant reward generates trust, right? And I think this is something that we don't talk enough about, right? I think this is also the answer for those economic theorists scratching their heads and asking themselves why people do stuff for free, because it gives you this space of trust that it gives you some potential that you can use. You don't have to, you may not be able to, but still there's this kind of potential of relationship that you know that you can build something lasting on it. I think the greatest lessons I've learned as a startup founder was entrepreneurship is a superpower, especially in this kind of crazy world that we've entered. It helps you cope with uncertainty. And it's not only, sun and flowers and everything is all right. It never will be. Many times it's like the worst of worlds, being an entrepreneur in many occasions, but still having this survival effect and this feeling that you can survive uncertainty and very bad situation, crisis, leaves you with this feeling of freedom coming from this bad experiences that in the end you've survived and you've learned and you've developed, and maybe you have a lot of scars because you always do, but still you're not afraid of many situations that makes other people don't sleep at night.